Hey everybody, welcome to this week's CanJS Community Hangout. Very first this morning, we're going to have Justin and Matt and Josh, and it looks like David just made it, to talk about the CanJS 2.2 roadmap. We just had a buy a feature meetup the other day. I'm going to let Justin actually talk about that. And then after that, we're going to move on to Matthew, who's going to be talking about CanView.attr and DOM mixins. So it should be pretty cool. I'm going to hand off to you, Justin, to start talking about the buy a feature and the roadmap.
Awesome. Thanks, Chris. So let me share my screen here. And we had on Tuesday, we had a 2.2 buy a feature where we did this agile game where people using their BitHub points could put their money, buy various features that they want us to implement. I created a nifty little app that allowed people to drag their name into a feature and then put how many points they wanted. And we went through everybody who contributed and got a list of features. So I'm going to go through the list of features that we're going to target for 2.2. I created a blog article, which you can find on our blog, that goes through them all, but I'm going to go through them in a little bit more detail. The only one that I'm not going to talk about is FRP, and Josh, if you want to fill that one in, you can be my guest. Or is that what you're talking about today? Is that what Josh is talking about? FRP?
No, he's just hanging out.
Oh, he's just hanging out. Okay. Well, then I will talk about it a little bit, but Josh, you can fill in.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go through only the ones that got purchased. So I'm going to skip some in my presentation, and I'm going to do it really fast. And let me know if you guys can still see my screen after hitting this play button. Sometimes you can't. Can you see my screen?
A white screen.
Just totally white?
No, we're good now.
Okay.
Yeah, we see it now.
So, first one is dirty checking. So this is the ability to just watch objects and properties on objects, objects keys, and list items, and know when they've changed, just plain old JavaScript objects. Angular kind of made this famous. This is really nice for I would especially say for beginners. There's some certain performance implications this has. If you've got lots and lots of observables, then something like CanMap is better. But we are not opposed to stealing people's good ideas. So this will be added. The next is FRP and can event streams. Josh, you wanna talk about this?
This is so event streams are associated with FRP. It's basically a higher. It's like, think like can computes on steroids. That's the simplest way I feel like I can explain it. You have like can computes, and they have all these methods for combining them with other can computes, and then hooking them up to DOM events and control events and all that stuff in a memory safe way. They allow you to do some fancy stuff. I'm working on documentation for selling them a little better, but cool.
So yeah, that's a pretty good explanation. I think we're going to release this initially as a plugin and then look to get it into core probably a little bit after 2.2.
There's a plugin available right now. It's kind of going through some changes, but you can look at can.eventstream and can.bacon. There's also a can.rx that uses, so it's a plugin that will use existing FRP engines to have these features without us having like the maintenance on that or reinventing any wheels.
You did talk about that a little more at last week's Hangout too, right?
And I think I'm talking about it later this month too.
Okay.
Yeah, so I'd say if people want a more in-depth look at the event stream, then they should look at last week's Hangout. We have it up on YouTube, so we have about 30 minutes just talking about the event stream and FRP.
We'll get more of this in the next few weeks too. So
So the next one is the content select tab, like the select attribute of the content element. This allows you to reposition part of your user or light DOM within a component's shadow DOM. Matthew has actually been worked on this one for a bit. We're not sure how we're going to solve it. We might be able to solve it one way in all browsers, or we might use Polymer as a polyfill. But in some form, we definitely want to support the content select attribute. The next is the can animate. This allows you to animate, to declare animations in your template. Pretty basic. And we're also going to add observable promises. So this means CanStash can respond to changes in an observable. So if I had passed an observable to a template, I might be able to, with the to-do observable, like when it's pending, show its progress. If you're using jQuery's defer its promises implementation. If it's rejected, give the reason, and if it's resolved, write out the value. Now, I should say all of these slides are kind of not the final APIs, so if you guys have comments about the APIs, please put them in. These are just proposals at this point, but we are moving quickly close to implementing them. The CanJS inspector is the next thing we're going to try to build. So this allows someone to really, the biggest thing I think is to inspect kind of what's going on behind the scenes in CanJS easily, to check an element, see what the component or the control is on the element, see what if live binding is keeping this component live to some data, some compute, and then be able to trace that compute to its dependency. So you'd be able to say, oh, well, this binding is connected to this compute. This compute is connected to a person's first name. The next one is the high-level routing glue. This is something that I think we've needed for a while because people get confused on how to set up a CanJS application on a high level, especially how to deal with CanRoute. This kind of takes two forms. There's kind of two forms of it. Again, this is a proposed API. We are going to provide a solution. This doesn't necessarily going to look like this. We might have something called a can app, which you can define what this, depending on some kind of observable rules, what the state, a single value name of the state of your application, and then map that state to templates that get rendered within another element. So when essentially the data, what this returns changes, will render a different template. This is so you can kind of say, okay, when the page attribute of CanRoute changes, change these templates, and then it can control animations between different states. You can define how to animate between different pages. This is kind of like would be the very high-level API, but we might also support a in-template API that makes things a little bit easier. In this case, these two things would almost do the same thing, except the animation would just kind of fade out and fade in between pages instead of, I think this one, oh, this one faded out and faded in too. This we could switch when page changes on CanRoute, and if it was home, your page was home, you would show some template here. If it was context, you'd show another template, and you can define with CanAnimate. You can use your rules to define how the pages should animate in and out.
This is pseudo mustache, is it? Or does that actually work?
No, yeah, it's pseudo.
This does not work yet. No, this could work. So for performance, we had some kind of performance features that people could bid on. The one that won for performance performance was first render. So we're going to work on how long it takes to get out a first draw of a template. That'll probably include template processing time and initial render with like a lot of data. And then for documentation, improved guides and improved docs was also bid on. So we're going to try to spend 3 or like 6.5 total weeks improving our guides and documentation. That was a big thing that everybody really pushed us for. And we also have some on-deck things that people really liked, but we couldn't get the votes to do that we probably will try to target upcoming. So those are sorted binding improvements. So we have a can checked, so that instead of having to write can value to toggle whether an input element is checked or not, you would write can checked because that makes a lot more sense. You might have a can href helper that, given some data, and there's 2 forms of it, but this is the form that I think most people think is easier to understand. This would essentially set this anchor's href to the value of can route link or can route URL past the data in here. So this would basically do that reverse translation to a URL given the data here to set the href of this link. Oh, and then can event arguments. This would allow you to write out the arguments that do something would be called with as a result of can click. So give you a little bit more fine-grained control. I think this one's something that I definitely want and is easy, so that will almost certainly be in the next release. And then finally, one that was popular but did not make it. I'm trying to find me. Would be InPage Templates. This would be another nice to have where you can just embed your HTML into your page directly, load up your site, and we would take care of setting up the live binding and like instantiating control or components automatically. So that is it.
Is that different from the document register one?
Yeah, document register one is more about well, integrating with document register and also making it so that there's methods can be on the elements themselves.
Right.
This one is just purely we load up the page and kind of things work as they do now. They're kind of two overlapping, but not the same.
For those that don't know, calling document register like turns an element into a real web component.
Yes. So one thing I should mention on the timeline. So these are kind of I should say that all of these things would be great to have in 2.2, but because of our infrastructure now and because we're backwards compatible, we might have releases that are like we might have 2.3, we might add observable promises and release 2.3 without any other features. Right? Just because it's nice to sometimes get this stuff out the door if it's good. So to say that these are all 2.2 features, that's probably not going to be true. However, these are the features kind of in this order that we're going to target. We are going to try to do all of these things before moving on to other features.
So is that kind of priority? Are you going to like work on the stuff that could be in 2.2 first before you work on the potentially API breaking things? Or
Well, none of these are API breaking.
None of them are? So they could all be prior to 3.0 then?
Yes. Yeah. So these are our features that we're going to basically primarily that's what we're going to work on for the next couple of months and hopefully get all of them in. But I think we might, like I said, we might have a 2.2 in a month from now if we get one of the features done and we all want it and it's production ready before some of the other ones are. There's no reason, in my opinion, to wait on all of this for 2.2.
What will be the highest priority one for 2.2 that we start work on first?
Well, that depends on who's wanting to work on what. I would personally, even though it didn't, what I think we should do, even though it would go kind of against what the features that were bought, but I talked to a lot of people and said they did not buy the InPage templates simply because they thought everybody else would buy it. If it were me, and keeping CanJS competitive was a big priority for me, I would immediately add dirty checking and InPage templates. Then we're parity with Angular, and then I would do all the other ones after that, if it were me.
I think you might need a lot to do that, though. I mean, to like have dynamic ability within the page.
What do you mean?
Well, I'm like, there are a lot of normal stash stuff doesn't work just in the page. Normal mustache, like on attributes, So you might want to have a different way to do stuff within attributes.
Well, attributes would work. It's only the form of attributes that are like where you've got an if kind of.
Yes. Right.
And I think that, I guess I'm of the opinion that that's okay. We would just say that that kind of stuff doesn't work. You need if you want to do that kind of stuff, create a helper that, your HTML for a page like this becomes, if you wanted that, you would just do, and then stuff would have your if else or whatever inside of it.
I'm wondering, as far as this feature goes, how okay would it be to say have this work automatically as long as you wrap it in a template tag with a certain attribute attached to it? Just as an idea, like wondering how people feel about that. So you could have this, put one more tag around the whole thing, and it'll work, like out of the box,
but
automatically rendering and everything.
Supported in all browsers, so you might as well just put it in the body at that point, because the template tag in older browsers is going to be just treated like a div, or in the case of IE, not even shown at all. Like it'd just be everything in its contents would just be ignored.
Right. I mean, it doesn't have to be the template tag. It could be just a script tag. The idea is we would what we would do is we would
tag.
Yeah,
script tag would. I've thought about that too, but a script tag has other issues because, people's like. A lot of times people want it because it's like they want their page to kind of like have HTML and their editors and stuff like that. And once you put things in a script tag, an editor sometimes treats the insides of that weirdly. Like, because then HTML is not going to be as. So there's a lot of, putting it in a template tag is fine, but that's what I'm saying. Like then you're the same as putting it in a div. You still got to make it all work. If that makes sense.
Kind of. The thing is, it's about like the way the template tag makes things inert. I think it'll make a difference for more complex examples than this. Like for example, if you have an if, and inside that if you have a script tag, that script tag will run unconditionally.
Yeah.
There's nothing we can do about that unless we wrap it in something that will render that script tag inert. Likewise, if we use a script tag to do our templates, we're kind of in trouble too because you can't put script tags inside script tags.
Yeah, I'm hoping that people do not, there are limitations, and if people are doing ifs with script tags, there's going to be other, that's just not something we'll say we support. Like that's.
I think it might be like higher value and an easy target to allow components into the page, so we can have these canned components straight in the page, but not necessarily support template logic inside them. I think that might be a compromise, and I think that might get us to like the 90% of what people actually expect when they want in-page templates. It's not necessarily that they want like a full templating engine without having to use a script tag or template. It's that they want.
They're definitely going to want.
I think eventually we need like
stuff. They might not want need an if, but they're definitely going to need this.
Yeah, I think we eventually need to have a HTML-based templating language. I think it's like inevitable.
That's an option too. Yeah, we can talk about that after this. I think I'm kind of on the fence about it, honestly.
I don't love it, but I think it's where everyone is going.
I can see why that would be useful, but we'll have to like figure that out.
You know, the good thing about Stash is all things are possible with CanView.attr and CanView tag to do stuff like that.
Oh, is that our segue into CanView.attr?
Can be.
Is that what we're talking about next?
Yeah, actually.
Yeah, it's actually what Matt's
I
talking
don't know if we
about.
have more stuff to talk about, but
That's a good segue.
It's a good segue.
Well, the only thing I will say before we totally move on is that I am pretty excited. I think that we've got a lot of good features that we can add that will really make CanJS quite competitive. Fortunately, Toby's growing, so we should have people on this full time pretty soon. So I'm looking forward to working on this stuff. That's my spiel.
Right on. Thanks, Justin.
No problem.
Awesome. So as we were saying, segue on to you, Matt. Tell us about this CanViewAdder.
Yeah, it turned out to be a really good segue, actually. Yeah, it's really, as you can see, I don't know if you saw in some of the examples that Justin showed, is CanViewAdder becomes a building block for like creating really cool stuff, like he showed creating hrefs. That's one particular use for it. I'll go over the API first, just so kind of get an understanding of what we're talking about. Of course, I didn't have that open. CanJS.com. CanViewAdder. So we're talking about DOM mixins, basically. We're talking about ways to attach attributes to a DOM element and have some type of dynamic behavior happen because of that. So let's just go over the API first, and then we can go over a few examples. All of the examples I'm going to be showing you are in CanJS itself, so if you pull the CanJS repo down, you can find these. This is the API. So CanViewAdder is a function that you call with the attribute name. So there's an example down here, the Tooltip example. We call CanViewAdder with Tooltip and then with a function. So the function, the adder handler takes the element, which is the element being operated on, and gives you as well adder data, which is kind of a little bit more advanced, but it really gives you some really interesting behavior because of that. For context, if you haven't used CanViewAdder at all, the best comparison I make is the mustache/stash helpers that return a function to get the element. So let's write one of those real quick, just to kind of show you how you can easily convert that same type of behavior into a CanViewAdder, and how you can kind of build upon that into making some even cooler things. So if we were going to do this as a helper, we would maybe, like, we're going to do a tooltip. You would do like span, and then you would call your helper tooltip, and then you have some text that's like, hey, I'm a tooltip. And that's it, right? So by putting it, that's a span. By putting it at the end of the span, that means that, well, not by putting it at the end of the span, it's actually because of how you're going to register it. So let's go ahead and register it. Can register helper, tooltip. So this is going to give you the content of the tooltip, which is the hey, I'm a tooltip. And then you would return a function which takes the element. And then from there, you use like maybe a jQuery plugin, and then set the content like this. So if you've probably written these before, how it works is you get the content, you set that on the element calling the jQuery tooltip. So that's the basic. This is a type of mixin, you could say, but we can kind of use these in a more powerful way by using CanViewAdder. So there's an example of this. There is a tooltip example in the source code. Where is it? Here it is. As you can see, these are all spans. They have a tooltip attribute with some text on them. And the way that we call this is kind of very similar to how you register a helper. CanViewAdder with the name of the attribute tooltip, with function with the L and adder data. We're not going to use adder data in this one. We're going to use it in a future one. But so this is a very basic example. You just call your jQuery plugin with the content. In this case, the content is the attribute's value, so you're going to get the attribute's value here. So that's the most basic. We can kind of do a little bit better than that. There is the dynamic one as well. So this tooltip is on these two buttons, on this delete button and on this archive button. So anytime you check this, it updates the tooltip. Go away. It updates the tooltip with the number of users that you want to delete or archive. See that? So the way this one works is the same way. CanViewAdder, the name of the attribute, tooltip. Remember, this is tooltip, and it's got some text. We are setting this here. Let me show you. Yeah, so tooltip is bound to this delete tooltip, and delete tooltip is right here. We get the length of the selected elements, then you return some text. So how this works as far as CanViewAdder goes is you call CanViewAdder, then you have this handler function, update tooltip, which anytime this is run, it's going to recall the jQuery plugin with the content. So the way we do this simply is to bind to the attributes on the element. Doing this means that anytime one of the attributes is manipulated, this is going to get called, and it's going to check to see if is this the tooltip attribute, and if so, we're going to run this again. So that's the reason why when you click this, the tooltip updates. So that's all cool. That's kind of all stuff you can do with just a regular mustache helper, though. It gets a little bit cooler, even though this is a pretty simple example. I think it really does show kind of the potential to modify things within the scope. So what do I mean by that? As you know, whenever you run a stash template, it's with a certain scope. And when CanViewAdder gets the context of the scope in which it's run, and you can modify that scope. So this example is fade and win. So there's a button, you click it, and some text fades in. If you notice, the button also changes, the text of the button. You click it again, and it goes away. So the reason for this is these are both CanViewAdders. The button has a toggle, which toggles showing, and fade and win is also on showing. So this kind of gets into the more powerful behavior of CanViewAdder. Let's look at the toggle one first. This one I really like, just because I think this is something that I've done 1,000, and I continue to do 1,000 times when I'm writing a component, where you can kind of write one simple CanViewAdder that kind of gives you this behavior forever. So what this is doing is we're changing the value of showing. So showing is actually a value within the scope. As you can see here, we're passing showing into the template. It's a can compute with the value of false. Let me show you your template here. So we have a button, and if showing is true, we say hide. If it's false, we say show. So the way that this toggle works is simply that it creates a compute based off of this showing attribute, or the showing property. So the way it does that is it gets the attribute value. So the attribute value is showing. That's the name of the scope property that we want to grab. And then adder data has a scope and a compute function, which creates a compute off of the scope. So anything that's on the scope, you can create a compute. So based off the adder value, we're going to create a compute on showing, which gives us, this is just a can compute. And then we're going to listen for whenever a click occurs, and we're going to change the value of the compute. So the value is true when you click, the value is false. You click again, it's true, and so on and so on. So this is something that you could use throughout your application just to toggle a particular scope value. And then it's tied in with this fade in when attribute as well. So fade in when is also listening to the showing. So you only have one attribute here, but you have two different CanView adders which are both listening to changes. So fade in when, we create another compute based off of the adder value, which is also showing here. We create a handler function that we want to run every time the compute changes. So the handler function will take in the value. This is going to be the value of showing. If the value is true, it's going to fade in. If the value is false, then it's going to fade out. We listen to changes by binding to the compute's change event, and we run the handler function. We also run the handler function anytime. We run it just as like an initialization step. We need to bind to the element's remove event, and by doing so, we need to do this because we need to clean up. So if you didn't have this here and the element was removed from the page, you'd still have this handler, this event that you're listening to, kind of hanging out there, and that's not good for memory. So you have to be careful whenever you're kind of listening to compute changes to make sure you bind to the element's remove event and make sure you unbind when it's complete. So yeah, that's CanViewAdder. Like I said, it's something that we're going to start using throughout CanJS's internals, I think, probably. And something that you should start to try to think about when you can use it. Kind of whenever you see yourself creating components in particular, and you're kind of repeating the same behavior over and over, there's a good chance you can kind of extract that and create a CanViewAdder with that.
We do use it for can clicks and can value.
Oh right, yeah. So all the binding stuff uses this.
And it takes a regular expression too.
Oh right, yes. Right, yeah, you can give it a regular expression, which means that so can event is what I don't know what that regular expression would be, but you're listening for certain types of events, right?
We're listening to can dash everything else.
Oh, can dash anything. So if we create might have to change that in the future. If we want to have can be a namespace for all of our stuff.
Regular expressions always get matched last.
Oh, I see.
So yeah, you can. That's why you can still have a can href, a can value, a can checked. Those will always get hit first. If we ever ran into the problem where we'd have to change it, if we ever ran into the problem where we wanted two open-ended name values, but I doubt we'll run into that. Hopefully not.
Yeah, CanViewAdder. It's cool.
Awesome. Anybody have any questions or anything that was informative? I've never used CanViewAdder. I've always used helpers, and I think I'm going to start using CanViewAdder.
To me, it's something that it's something you don't, or at least I don't think to do naturally. It's I have to kind of force myself to think, oh, this would be a good place for a CanViewAdder. But I think over time, as we get used to using them, I think it'll become more natural.
I think it's good for mixin behavior.
Right. Yeah, anytime you don't need an element that has its own special behavior, but you might want to attach something to an input, or this button, for example.
There's also I've been thinking about making it so CanViewAdder, you can have a special form of CanViewAdder that you can tell it you want to be able to consume the contents inside the CanViewAdder element, like the element that CanViewAdder has. I don't know why. But it's for like component-like behavior. If you wanted to really make like component-like behavior to be able to rearrange, you know, the sub-component or the light DOM, you could do that via a asset.
Right.
Okay, awesome. If nobody has anything else, then I'm going to wrap up this week's. And next week we'll be shooting out a message letting you know on Monday what to expect from that Friday's Hangout. So thanks again to Justin and to Matt, and also Josh and David for joining us. And we'll see you guys next Friday. Bye.
See you all.